Welcome to The Weakest Link. Just kidding. It's not the weakest link. This is Between Zak and Aaron with Zak Aarons. This is the best show at the intersection of agentic AI, construction, technology, and pop culture in the world. It is my great pleasure to welcome our current guest. This is the first ever founder and CEO we've had on Between Zak and Aaron. This is the legendary Fraser Patterson, CEO and founder of Skillit. Fraser, welcome to Between Zak and Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
So you have probably the most fascinating background-ish, although I do have a portfolio CEO who grew up in Zimbabwe and literally became a pilot, flew himself over here.
Yeah, that's impressive.
He's also in construction tech. Shout out to Nyasha Gutsa of Billy. He's probably the most interesting person, but you're right up there. It's a MetaProp portfolio. We've made close to 200 investments, and you're probably the silver medal of most interesting founder in terms of your background. So that's pretty good. You're beating out like 190 people. But before we get into your background, I want to dive deep and long and probe areas of extreme discomfort.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit about what Skillit is and what your mission is? Because one of the things I'm inspired by, empowers me every single day working with you. When we crack it, and we're already starting to, we're gonna make a hugely positive impact on the world with this company. Yep. So can you just walk us through what is Skillit and what's your mission?
So Skillit is construction's first AI-powered hiring platform. And the mission is pretty bold, but it's very simple, and it's to fix the world's skilled labor crisis. So quite literally fix the shortage of construction labor that we have in the world. These are really core jobs that are historically really hard to discover. It's not very clear where the best opportunities are. It's very difficult to get to those opportunities. It's a really kind of like cumbersome process. This kind of crisis that we have of having too few skilled workers in the world in construction, we fundamentally think it's really an access problem to start with. If you solve access to this demographic, to these workers, then you can ultimately solve the shortage. And the AI that we're building essentially makes it possible for companies like Mortenson, DPR, and Kiewit, and now dozens of others, to basically source and connect with craft workers at speed and kind of level of precision and scale that's never been possible before AI. It's built atop the largest vetted network of craft workers in the United States. I think in the era of AI, these are going to become some of the most future-proof jobs for the next decade or two. So seeing that early impact on how it's changing these workers' lives, and they're working for these large E&R, like large construction companies, are getting paid on average maybe 15% more, up to 30% more. They have, wage growth, career growth, etc. Like that, it's a huge kind of like impact.
How many workers are there in this pool?
Broadly in the US, for example, we've got 8 million field and craft. So the way to think about it is all of your skilled workers, from laborer to carpenter, electrician, plumbers, heavy equipment operators, pipe layers, is about 6.5 million. There's about 1.5 million that are what you'd call like field admin roles, right? Superintendents, project managers, estimators. So that's about 8 million. We're at like 220,000 today. That's growing really quickly. I mean, it's like 5x'd in the last 12 months. We're gonna get to 1 million by the end of this year, 2 million by the end of next year. That's our goal. So we'd have like 1 in 3-ish in the United States on the platform.
We're talking about an AI agentic hiring platform to hire human laborers, but the majority of what they're doing is building out infrastructure for AI. The spend on data centers, neoclouds, fabs to make all these new chips is astronomical. Do we have enough workers currently available to complete all these ambitious projects, or do we need to leverage Skillit and other platforms to bring new workers online?
Well, I think it's both. So in terms of the rate of growth of like data center construction is totally unprecedented. Just to put this into context, I think most of the forecasts point towards a spend over the next few decades that is about 10x the total spend that we've spent as a species on electrification, all highways and all railroads. I mean, that's wild. That's
extraordinary.
And if you think about how many workers were involved globally in those projects, it's about 30 million workers. So this is going to be more like 300 million workers. We have a deficit in the United States at the moment of about 500,000 workers. You know, you've got like about 8.3 million on payroll. So if you just divide through, you get to about 5% missing. So it's not actually that big a shortage. The way we think about this at Skillit is look at all these other major industries, retail, nursing, software, they all have much larger shortages, like way higher, like 2 times higher, 3 times higher, 4 times higher. But none of them complain. None of them have the same level of pain as construction has. So it's kind of strange, right? It's like it's actually the smallest labor shortage, but it's got the most amount of reported pain. And we think the reason for that is because nobody's actually digitized this workforce. Therefore, they are effectively invisible, and 1 in 20 missing feels a lot more like 1 in 3. So if you solve the access piece first, imagine AI first access to the 95% of workers that are out there. If you're talking about the top 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 companies, we tend to think of it as like the top 5,000. Those companies are mostly chiefly responsible for all this mission critical work. So yeah, you could essentially reroute a lot of the workers to those companies and deliver those projects. So I think the labor is actually there to do that work. Then that also means you've got access to the whole national labor pool in order to be able to deliver those projects. But no one's built that infrastructure.
Until now.
Until now. We're the first to build that, to make that possible.
I know I'm biased as an investor in Skillit, but I think you are uniquely positioned to be leading this company, and you're kind of the only person on earth who can build this properly because of your varied experience. You've been a journeyman carpenter, you've been a general contractor, you've dabbled in mathematics and computer science and programming. So this is a rare blend of an entrepreneur who can really speak the language, speak to the pain points of his customers. So let's talk about the path that you've gone on to acquire all these skills in a thus far relatively short life. You're not super old, you're not as old as you look. So let's take it back to the beginning. Let's talk about growing up in Edinburgh, which for those who don't know is the largest city in Scotland, really the main cultural center along with Glasgow in Scotland, arguably more.
I'd say it's the capital city and it's a cultural center. I'm not sure it's the largest. I think Glasgow's the largest.
Glasgow's the largest?
Yeah, I think so.
So it was a cultural hub. In 1996, Danny Boyle's explosive movie Trainspotting drops.
Yeah.
What was it like growing up in Edinburgh when it was really the cultural hub of Scotland and a major node in UK culture in general?
There was only 2 types of music in Edinburgh. There was either rave culture or like rock. I wasn't really that into rock, I liked raves. So I was always kind of out clubbing, partying. And then UMTV Raps kicked off and I got really into my hip hop. And that's the best time for hip hop. Early Snoop and Jerry the Damager and stuff like this. But growing up in Edinburgh at that time, that film, what's brilliant about it is it kind of captured the zeitgeist of like what it was like growing up in that part of the world where heroin was rife, like there's a lot of poverty, kind of deeply artistic, curious culture, lots of coffee houses in the morning, lots of whiskey drinking and beer drinking. At that age, I wasn't drinking whiskey, I couldn't afford it.
So were hip hop acts touring there, or was it just through
UMTV Raps? UMTV Raps, 5 Freddy.
Did you get Video Music Box too, or just UMTV Raps?
No, UMTV Raps and like
Ed Lover and
Dr. Dre.
The other Dr. Dre.
Yeah.
Super famous.
And like at that time, that really struck a chord. And so yeah, me and a very small group of friends just got massively into hip hop. You know, I look back fondly on it. I mean, great place to grow up.
And so when you're down, when things maybe aren't going as well as you want, when one of your annoying VCs calls and harasses you about something, I'm sure that's never happened.
Never.
I'm sure I've never done that.
No.
Which MC or hip hop group from that era do you turn to drive inspiration?
Let me think. Nas, I still think Represent on Illmatic is probably the best song ever created, and I think it's one of the best hip hop albums. I mean, every single one of those songs is an absolute banger.
I agree. Illmatic for me is the #1 hip hop album of all time.
Yeah, it's absolute genius.
He got all of the best producers to collaborate. He had Pete Rock producing. He had DJ Premier producing tracks. He had Q-Tip producing tracks. He had Large Professor producing tracks. I was watching an interview with Pharoah Monch. He was from Jamaica, Queens, Nas from Queensbridge. He remembers Illmatic dropping and he's like, how do I even work with one of those producers?
Right. How do you think he did that? How do you think he got that kind of talent?
I know how he did it. So, did you ever listen to Main Source? So Main Source was a late 80s, early 90s group. They never really broke out. They released a song called Live at the Barbecue on the album Breaking Atoms. And that song features Nas. And he was already known in Queensbridge, which is arguably the best ever neighborhood for hip hop. And Queensbridge at the time was MC Shant, Roxanne Shante. They were getting into this beef with Boogie Down Productions in the South Bronx, and there were all these diss tracks going back and forth. Nas had already come up locally, and so they threw him on this track. And when Live at the Barbecue drops, everybody in hip hop is like, who is this guy? And so all the producers, some he knew already, but they all actively wanted to work with him. So he had created this aura around himself. He built enough buzz in advance of Illmatic where he was able to get that talent into the studio. And I recommend you listen tonight to his verse on Live at the Barbecue, because the stuff he's saying, it just had never been said like that in hip hop history. And that's why so many people took notice of it. He's my favorite MC of all time. He's still making music. He's actually put out an album per year for the past 6 years. This guy doesn't have to work. He was in like the Series A round of Coinbase. Like, he's made a bunch of money from recording.
Cool.
Yeah, Nas, because he became friends with Ben Horowitz, he's got a bunch of VC investments with his manager, Anthony Saleh.
This is what happens when you have like a BC boy on your cap table.
While Illmatic was out on the hip hop charts, I think the most popular album here on the pop charts was actually Chant by the Benedictine monks of Santo Domingo de Silos. There was a strange, at least here in the United States, strange revival of passionate interest in Benedictine chanting. These monks that were, look up, another thing would be to look up how many weeks the album Chant by the Benedictine monks of Santo Domingo de Silos stayed at #1 on the Billboard pop charts. This wasn't the religious music charts. This wasn't the easy listening charts. This was #1 on the pop charts, along with like Whitney Houston. The monks were battling Whitney Houston at the time. It was a beautiful but weird
I actually
era.
I have never been, nor am I, nor will I be attached to any religion. It's just not something I've ever really, but I remember really enjoying Mass, like really enjoying church. I thought it was really beautiful. The singing was beautiful, like the communion and stuff. And there was one monk there that like was actually continuing to do experiments like Gregor Mendel.
That's
kind of wild. With actual pea splitting and stuff. It's just weird. And then there's this other monk who was like really into shotguns, and he'd be shooting on the corner of like, I don't know, a very, very esoteric and an eclectic, strange bunch of eccentrics.
So you get shipped off to a boarding school on the banks of Loch Ness. Can you tell us about what was that school called? What was the experience like? How much like Harry Potter was it? Can you just, and what did you learn there?
So actually the boarding school was before hip hop, because I got into the hip hop at like, I must have been about 16. Before that, I went to this boarding school, and I was really pissed about it to start with. So I was about to become a professional footballer. I was a goalkeeper. Oh, wow. And I was about to be signed. I got like a couple of like term sheets being brewed in Glasgow from Celtic, Rangers. I was there training with them. Like it was all, panned out. I was going to be a professional footballer. And then my dad left home. My mom unfortunately died shortly after. And so I got sent off to this boarding school. And I was really pissed because I was like, that means I can't do the football. I mean, so it was all rugby and cricket and hockey and stuff. Anyway, get there. It's this like Jacobean castle on huge grounds. It's right on the corner of Loch Ness. It's in this place called Fort Augustus. So it's Fort Augustus Abbey School. The moment I got there, I got into trouble. I was playing in an arcade. My dad had given me this like little switchblade. You know, everyone had a wee knife on them back then, right? And I got into some scuffle and like, you know, it came out of my pocket and so when I got introduced to the school, I arrived in a police car. I mean, just really bad. Like the worst first impression you could possibly make, right? So I show up and these priests meet me at the school and they bring me in, and because it was like it was like the Benedictine monks. I mean, it was an active church, right, as well. Military, so it had army and navy. So I joined the army while I was there. Yeah, I was there for 4 years, all boys. Really strict, like really strict. I got the belt a lot, I got caned, I got library, I got all sorts of weird, I mean, and this was all legit, like this was all legit. You know, and I was still calling with my dad once in a while, and my brother, and they'd be like, how is it? And I was like, I'm not enjoying it. Like today I got, you know, I had to hold books for like an hour and I got kicked in the stomach and dropped them and had to start again. Like really kind of weird, but anyway. Got a really good education, I will say. I think the curriculum's very strong. Scottish education system generally is pretty strong. The military stuff was fascinating, doing like recce's, like off for like weekends, you know, like, you know, digging your own little like bed and bivouac and all this kind of stuff, stripping rifles, it was cool. Abseiling, abseiled out helicopters into Loch Ness, like, whoa, wouldn't recommend that. So it wasn't until later, I was a portrait artist as a kid, and I still am, I still sometimes do it. I got to do the school mural, and it was this massive mural. I got so obsessed with it, and my art teacher wasn't really paying attention, that I didn't go to any other class for like 6 months, and they asked me to leave. So you mentioned Harry Potter. When I left there, the first time I ever watched Harry Potter, I was like, my God, they filmed that in my school. Amazing. Just aesthetically, the whole architecture is, you know, the interiors. It's even got like the cloister. It's got the checkered board and chessboard, like big one in the middle of the cloister. All the gargoyles and all this. The whole setup is just boarding school. Similar uniforms, everything.
You're out of this castle. You make a little bit of a career and life pivot, and you decide to apprentice as a carpenter.
Yep.
How did you find your way into that, and what did that then turn into?
My dad was a surveyor, like a quantity surveyor. So I used to follow him around holding like the other end of tape measures all the time. I was on lots of different job sites all around Europe. I always loved construction, always liked building things. And I was entrepreneurial. Like I was the first, I made a bunch of like replica cardboard watches when I was like 5 years old and took them to school to sell for a pound. Yeah. Like, you know, all like the face was all held together by sellotape and stuff. Like my dad actually was the one who was like, you should speak to G&S. I'm trying to remember, it's Gary and Stephen, I think, two brothers who ran this carpentry company. And I went to apprentice. And at the same time, part of that was going to, I think it's now called Edinburgh College, but it was called Telford College at the time. It was like a technical college. So I'd go to site for a week, and then I'd go to college for a week. So I'd learn technical drawing and all the kind of like theory of carpentry, and then I would do like actual work on site. Everything I learned in college was bullshit. None of it applied. None of it. I'd walk on site and be like, let me get my mitre. And they'd be like, don't use that. What are you talking about? None of it translated. And actually that was part of my hesitation today about just the way trade schools are run today, is because they are a fixed environment with fixed tooling, and yet all the job sites are moving so quickly, and the skills that are being required on site, how do you inform that curriculum? Like when I first came to New York, I went to a trade school and I was like, is that a bandsaw? I've never seen one on site. I've never seen any application of one, and yet kids are still learning that. As we start moving into, you know, robotics complementing craft workers, and then you look at like the speed at which, say, data center construction is growing, there's definitely going to be an evolution of skills. And like this is part of the vision for Skillit, is as we get further into having more and more construction companies on the platform and more demand activity, we have the demand data to be able to point it upstream at the high school ecosystem, trade school ecosystem, and say, this is what you should be teaching, and make that dynamic and active, right? It's responsive to the actual needs in real time on the ground, right? And it can show you the pathways, how much workers are earning, where, what skills you need in order, like what's the fastest kind of what's the most economically efficient path to being fully economically productive and as a craft worker. I think things have changed. I think the industry's got a lot better, but when I was an apprentice, I mean, I got the shit kicked out of me a lot. I once got hilted to a wall. I was wearing a denim jacket and denim jeans, and I got hilted gunned to the wall. Just to give you an idea of like how kind your co-workers can be.
Have you pitched Hilty Ventures to invest in Skillit?
Yeah, I know. Who do I know?
Hilty Ventures.
I do know Hilty.
He's used your product.
That's true, yeah.
Not necessarily in the intended way, but
no, but it does show great versatility as a product.
How did you overcome that and then start to build your own business as a journeyman carpenter? And what does it even mean to be a journning carpenter versus just a carpenter?
I went through as much technical college and apprenticeship as I could. I did, my several thousand hours. I kind of went off on my own. I worked with another couple of mill shops in London. I also did a lot of like high-rise steelwork, which is interesting work. Building out the core steel in, large residential and commercial like buildings in Canary Wharf by any chance? Yep, there. Did that for a little while, realized that was not a long-term career for me. I was probably gonna die at some point, walking beams and stuff. It's like risky work. So went back to the carpentry. I think doing that, I got really interested in carpentry as a pathway into being a GC, because the scope of what is constructed with wood by carpenters touches everything. And therefore I think, you learn more about construction as a whole. So I got really into the idea of being a GC, and I get offered this other job that I did for a little while, which was to go door to door and tell people that their home was about to be possessed by the government so they could knock it down and build the Lee Valley regeneration project for the Olympics, right? And so I'm going door to door doing this. The money was really good. Like, it was a weird opportunity, and I was getting paid like 3 times what I was getting paid as a carpenter. And I would go door to door, and I'd tell people this like party line, I'd be like, I'm really sorry. And after a while, I did feel kind of shitty about this. But then I learned there was this like way to counter it. They had rights. So I was kind of telling them like, hey, I'm from this company. Your house is gonna get repurposed. It's compulsory purchase order or something it's called. And I was like, but
eminent domain,
all that. But if you go here, right, and you can file a claim, yada yada. And I meet this guy who's on a shipyard who was also subject to this huge development. And it's just so strange. He was telling me the story. He's like, this woman that just died, she was found in her home. He's like, this is a big problem in Britain. He's like, there's, women live longer than men. And in the UK at the time, if you had any assets, like if you had like 20 grand, you couldn't get government assistance. And so what tends to happen is that you're selling your home, you're selling your primary asset, or you're mortgaging it to pay for your long-term care. And I had this like idea, almost like the Golden Girls meets Facebook. Like, all these people are all living on their own. They all have similar health concerns, right? They could be living with each other in one of their primary residences that's customized somewhat to enable them to live together, right? So that's the Golden Girls piece. And then they can rent out their secondary, like their home. So they're not having to sell their primary asset. And maybe these can be matched based on healthcare needs and stuff. And it caught the attention of like a bunch of people in the UK government. I got invited to the House of Lords to like present this. It was a wildly ambitious project. I was like a kid at the time. I had no sense of how do you go to market with something like that?
Right.
So, like, imagine I pitched that to you. It's MetaProp. You'd be like, how do you get that off the ground? Like, where do you even start? Is there a wedge? Anyway, out of that came the need to renovate a lot of homes. And that's when I became the GC, and I started doing all these townhouse projects and became really fascinated by the process of construction and how do you make it more efficient, trying to understand it from the client side, understanding it from the design side, figure out ways in which to make the process more efficient and whatnot. So became a GC for a few years.
And then your life takes another unexpected turn. You've always mentioned to me having this hobbyist but deep interest in mathematics, and you've always been a tinkerer with computers. You've always been interested in mathematical theory. How did that start, and did that inform your next chapter when you moved to Mexico?
I actually, at boarding school, I got really into math. I had a great teacher, and I got a little bit addicted to number theory. Gualas theory, permutation sets, like Cantor stuff. I spent probably about a year teaching myself beyond calculus, but into some of this stuff. I started to develop a few theorems of my own, and I think I proved one theorem, and I sent it to my friend's dad, who's at Heriot-Watt University in Edinburgh. And he was like, oh, this is kind of interesting. I don't know much about it. I'm going to punt it to a friend of mine. And the friend was at King's College. And he was like, this is really interesting. Would you come in and get to know one another? When I got to meet him, there was someone in the room, and they had a t-shirt on that said, mathematicians are machines for turning coffee into theorems. And I was like, I can maybe get along with these guys. Like, they're kind of quirky. And he was like, okay, so we've got these 2 theorems that we've been working on. And my nomenclature was like all over this place. Like, because I was largely trained, self-taught, right? Like, I did a bit of stuff in boarding school, autodidact. I had to homogenize the language a little bit. So he's like, these 2 theorems. And he's like, why don't you take a crack at one? Just try and understand it, right? And I was like, okay, I'm gonna go away. So I went to the coffee shop around the corner. It was like a Pret or something, I don't know, whatever. Trying to figure it out, and I come back, and he was like, you've got further than my 2 students. And I was like, oh. And he was like, you should come and do some math with us. I did it for a little while, but I just kept getting pulled back into construction. But I did have this good year where I was really deep into it. And I think that's informed, I think, a lot of the way I think about things like construction. Like, there's always a first principles way of thinking about, almost anything, frankly, instead of by analogy. And I think math is a great tool to think from first principles. And it's also not bound in the same way physics is by reality. We have this debate inside Skillit about what stack to use to build the platform on. And the reason we picked Rails is because the people who tend to work in Rails, to me, are a bit like craftsmen and mathematicians. It's not about how much code can you churn out. It's how beautiful is it to work with as a tool, as a platform, right? So you'll hear people who are into Rails talking about how beautiful and elegant the code is. And people from the outside don't get that, because they're like, you should be building in Python because it's this. And you're going to struggle to hire people because the talent pool. And I'm like, yeah, but if you found a company and you're a craftsman, and the mission of that company is to solve and scale the world's craft, don't you think that's going to attract people who are like, that's my jam? That's what I want to work with. And that's exactly how we hired a lot of our team today. And my VP of engineering, I think he's a genius. I mean, he's literally the smartest engineer, both in product and engineering, which is unusual. And he's Rails all day long because of this, it's the language of a craftsperson. So I've always been attracted, I think, to people who are really into craft, into their craft.
I love that.
Yeah.
So you've now developed competencies in mathematics, computer science, physics, carpentry, steelwork, contracting, and entrepreneurship. It's now time to put them all together. You're in Mexico. You start a company called OnisVida. Tell us about that experience.
Yeah, so when I got to Mexico, I was actually there because my wife at the time, her mother had been diagnosed with cancer. She was terminally ill. She only had a year to live. She actually, when we got there, lived a lot longer, which is great. So it was kind of under this unspoken rule that I wasn't going to start any other startups, right? Because I'd get a little obsessed and lose myself in something, and I wanted to be there and I was just having my first kid as well, right? So I was struggling being idle, and so I got this opportunity to go lecture at a university there called Centro. It's a private university. The family there, Gina Diaz Barroso is her name, one of the most affluent families in Mexico. And it's a design university, and they were going to launch this entrepreneurship class. And so they offered it to me. And my plan was, I'm going to get all these, it's about 100 kids, right, undergrads, and I'm going to basically ask all of them to pitch an idea. I'm going to take the best 10 ideas that I think have got legs, and the person who came up with that idea is the founder. And then they have to go and basically pull the team together and compete for talent, right, among the rest of the class. And then I'm going to walk them through a curriculum that's how do you take this idea to market? And actually 3 of them got funded. One of them became a real business, which is this on-demand massage. So they developed this table and little thing, and they just go give people massages to their homes. Pretty cool. Anyway, so while I'm doing that, one of the people who comes in is this guy, Fernando Fabre, who became a friend of mine. And he ran Endeavor Mexico. I don't know if you know, do you know Endeavor, the organization?
Agency.
So it's a high impact entrepreneurship.
That endeavor, yeah.
That
not
endeavor.
William Morrison,
yeah. I think Reid Hoffman's on the board, all this. Okay. He came in because he was going to help structure some of the curriculum or had some ideas. And he was like, what's crazy is I just left Infonavit this morning, right? I'll tell you about Infonavit. It started off as a builder, it became a mortgage lender. Turns out it's got wild cash flows coming in from, something like 80% of all of the mortgages in Mexico and I think other parts of LATAM are Infonavit. So it's got a huge surplus cash flow. And so what it decided to do is launch a credit. And the idea behind the credit is every worker in Mexico, 5% of their salary goes into Infonavit as well. It's like a mandatory savings fund. And you can buy your first home with it on it's really affordable.
It's like putting
mortgages.
Social Security into your down payment, basically.
Yeah, it's like Social Security to stimulate the property economy, right? So it was Felipe Calderon's idea to launch this new initiative, which was this new credit for renovation, right? So it was renovate the home. The problem was that people would take the money out and go and buy a car, or they'd give the money to an architect and the architect would disappear. It was like the Wild West of so they put this contest out. How would you solve this problem? And I was like,
yeah, it's perfect for you.
I think we can devise a solution. So me and Fernando and somebody else, Roberto Charbel, we put together this plan, which was what you do is instead of giving the money to the homeowner, you put it into what's called a fideicomiso, like a trust. And we selected HSBC for this. So the money goes into HSBC and it sits in this little trust. And it's a trust at scale because it's not it's like thousands, potentially tens, hundreds of thousands of these accounts. And then over here, you go to the large insurers and you create a small performance bond for 20 grand, 30 grand, which ensures the contractor performs the terms of the contract, which we would standardize and structure. And we built a software that essentially had the estimate and then would turn it into a scope of work. And then the homeowner would just go in and tick stuff off when they were happy with it, and those funds would be released and the bond would be drawn down, right? So it was like a way of essentially guaranteeing that the homeowner would pay for the work that had been done and the worker would deliver, the contractor would deliver the work. And it just, it took off really quickly and built the team out. It's interesting. As I'm building that, a lot of the narco stuff was starting to bleed in. It was really weird. It was a really weird time to live in Mexico City, really gruesome. I had a kidnap threat. I had someone call my office and say, oye pendejo, tengo tu hija. And I'm like, whoa, you have my kid? Yeah. I'm like, wait a minute, that can't be true. I think she's next door. And I pop through it. I've only got one kid. I'm like, what the fuck is that? Yeah. And then that's you on their radar and they know that you've got, it's just, and after a while I was like, I want to take the kernel of this idea and take it to the biggest market in the world, which is New York City, right? I was like, I want to get my family to New York City. So moved here. We had some investors already lined up and launched this idea, but here. And over time realized there was a better way to do this. It didn't involve the banks, didn't involve the insurers, and that you could essentially self-insure through a process of continual improvement. You could actually do these large renovation projects, very high end, and essentially guarantee the work. That company got acquired and it got a good influx of capital and it started to scale.
And that was Bolster.
That's Bolster. The number one challenge became, how do you find the workers? Where are you finding these really highly skilled carpenters and
who can do balustrades?
Yeah, and I was like, okay, this has to become the primary focus of mine, because the work was coming in thick and fast. We grew to 7 digits in revenue pretty quick, and so I started to kind of tinker with this idea that if I could ask you a kind of insider question, I would know if you're a good carpenter or not on the phone. Because the problem is you can't bring, when I was an apprentice, I used to show up, I used to show up at a mill shop or a site, and they'd be like, yeah, work on the sash. And after an hour, they'd be like, all right, cool, you're in. That's it. You can't do that anymore. You can't show up on a building site and do work without an employment arrangement. The liabilities, you get one splinter and it's $1 million claim.
Yeah.
So you can't really assess for the skills of a craft worker until they're on site. And I was like, what if you could use knowledge as a leading indicator of skill? So what I used to ask a bunch of questions, but the one that was a really good one is, what are the true dimensions of a 2x4? And I'd get all these weird answers well, it's 2x4. And I'd be like, okay, you don't know what you're talking about. Or someone would be like, oh, that's a trick question, right? And I'm like, okay. And then 1 in 4 or 5 would be yeah, it's, 2 3/4, 1.5, blah, blah. I'd be like, why is that? Well, it comes off the mill and then I got to be trim it and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, you only know that if you're a journeyman or you're probably installing and therefore you're buying and therefore you're installing. And 2 things were happening at this time. One is I was like, that's a really good way to assess the worker and build up a digital representation of their skills. But then you would also be able to find them. Because what I was discovering is I was like, if somebody came in who was a really good carpenter, I'd be like, do you have friends? And they'd be like, yeah, sure. And then they'd come in. And I'd be like, this is not a pure skills shortage problem. This is that because no one's ever digitized the capabilities and preferences of these workers, you also can't discover them because you've got nothing to search for because they don't have a digital, it's not like they're on LinkedIn. LinkedIn's this perfect moment where everyone's got a resume and they're sat in front of a desktop. And they're just waiting to go ping, and like you're connected. That's not how it works if you're out in the field all day. So we've had to solve for that fundamental difference in how you bring workers onto a platform and digitize their criteria. Anyway, I started to really dig into this and I was like, this is a big problem, because I started talking to other GCs, some of the larger ones, and they were like, this is the biggest problem we have. Like, we cannot find highly skilled electricians, plumbers, HEOs, pipe fitters. I mean, and I was like, this is what I want to spend the next decade building, solve this problem.
I remember one of the first times I heard you talk about knowledge as a leading indicator of skill, and I was skeptical, and you said, look, I'm also really interested in physics, and physics at a cocktail party is really cool to know about.
Right.
Well, depending on which cocktail parties you're at, but at certain cocktail parties, having highfalutin knowledge on quantum physics or linear algebra is desired by ordinary lay people who may have other professional jobs like venture capitalist, startup founder, electrician. At first I thought about, and you said, well, but nobody is going to study up on carpentry or electrical unless they actually want to do work, because it doesn't have the same sexiness factor at a cocktail party.
I could be sitting at home at night reading Schrodinger's cat and being like sounding really clever the next day in the office. But if I was like, yeah, but do you actually understand how to manipulate the differential equation that underlies the wavelength equation? Like, do you know how to do that? You'd be like, well, no. So you really can use knowledge as an indicator of skill. And then there's other things that complement that give you a stronger signal, like your work history. And so you worked like, I was a carpenter for 6 years. Okay, what did you do? Well, I built sheds with my dad. Okay, that's different from, I was a, entry level, then I was a, journeyman level 1, 2 with Brassfield and Gorey on the following project. Like, it's using knowledge as a leading indicator of skill. It's not using knowledge as a absolute confirmation of your skill. And all these other things as we built out the platform that really do give stronger and stronger signals to
well, that's what create
that was the wedge thinking.
That's what continues to create what I think is a wide and deep moat around the platform itself. And why you can't just vibe code it. Sorry.
You can't vibe code a labor marketplace. No.
I have a couple zanier questions coming your way, but before we get there, you've mentioned your exit strategy for Skillit is death.
My death.
So your death.
Just want to be clear, not the company's death.
So you want to build this thing. As I mentioned, you're still a young man.
Thank you.
You want to build this thing for a while. Like, what does Skillit look like in 20 years? Is Skillit on Mars? Do we have Skillit in space? What's the long-term vision for this company?
We think about it in like 3 acts. Act 1, as I mentioned, is solve the access problem, right? We got 95% of the workers in construction exist, and no one's digitized them, no one's brought them online, no one's organized their skills and preferences and built a platform for them to be accessed and routed into these like high value mission critical jobs or and so on and so forth. Act 2 is, with this kind of infrastructure that we're building, we now have all of these large top E&R contractors on the platform, the hiring volume's growing. As we get more demand on the platform, you can think of Skillit as like a system of record, right? Because we're capturing the labor and digitizing it for the first time. It's a system of action because all of this hiring activity that's happening, we're building out and helping these recruiters with automated workflows, right? Sourcing automatically. How do you screen automatically? How do you route? How do you connect with the worker? It's also a system of intelligence because we're capturing this data from the worker for the first time and all this transactional data on the platform. Over time, this is creating a really proprietary system of demand data we can actually see where the work is happening and exactly like how much skill do you need, what type of skill, how much do you get paid for it, what's the path like. If you take that and you take the agents we're building and you go upstream a little more into the high school ecosystem, trade school ecosystem, you can pull more people into the trades and you can solve, I think, two things at once, which are the reason why we have a labor shortage. So just, a little bit of groundwork. The reason why we have a labor shortage is because it's so hard to go from being an entry-level worker to an economically productive worker. It's the ultimate marshmallow test. We've made that wildly hard. In the first place, you're coming in and you're having to think about tools and buying yourself tools and transport, and you're working out maybe in the cold or in the extreme heat or whatever. Meanwhile, you can kind of walk across the street and get paid to work in retail in a nice shop with, maybe you want to work in a restaurant, whatever. Your earnings there are pretty flat long term. Like your earnings in the trades grow pretty quickly over the first 4 years, but you have to, again, pass that marshmallow test to get there. The other thing is you work for one company and that apprenticeship program shuts or it doesn't work out because of one manager. That's often a terminal decision in your career. So we have about 500,000 people every year come into the top of the funnel and only about 240,000 of them pop out the other side. The loss there is primarily because we've made the economics terrible and the routing is so fragile. I think at scale, as we bring more workers onto the platform, you can solve for the routing using AI and you can actually route people into these jobs and into these training opportunities continuously. And the other piece is you can pull the economics together and actually start to, almost like in an insurance way, bring the pay forward a little bit so they can actually maintain focus and stay in the trade so they can reach their full earning power. Our math shows that would turn the labor shortage of about 400,000 a year into essentially a surplus. You get the kind of like conversion rate to go from about 35% today to about 75%. That would solve the actual shortage. And from there, I think construction's the most complicated labor coordination problem in the world. And the reason it's so complex is because you've got physical workers who are out and about, often don't have digitized, skills, preferences. Very hard to find, hard to assess, hard to route. But also in construction, the jobs are new all the time, right? They're not in a fixed location. So that means you've got a new labor problem to solve every single time because the labor's constantly shifting, some of it's local, blah, blah, blah. I think if you solve this problem for construction, you gain a foundational superpower to go into all the other physical industries. So you can go into manufacturing, utilities, facilities, space exploration, space, right? Like quite literally And that takes you from you're servicing possibly 8 million workers in the United States to 1.5 billion workers around the world. 1 in 3 workers are physically involved, out and about. Their smartphone is their office kind of thing.
One of the things someone somewhat facetiously asked me the other day, it was another snarky VC, was like, well, what's going to happen to Skillit, bro, when everything's a robot? And I was like, well, there's so many robotics companies. Who do you think is actually going to be able to evaluate which robots are best for which job, which robots can actually get to job site X in time? Yeah,
robots. Let's go. Okay.
How long before robots are doing complex carpentry, in your opinion?
10 to 20 years.
And are those humanoids or are those purpose-built to do one carpentry function?
I think they'd have to be humanoid because I don't know how you would get to an ever-changing terrain site where the carpentry needs to be done in order to be able to actually execute the work well. And let's take autonomous vehicles, right? We've been at it for 20 years. It's arguably an easier problem to solve because the environment itself is somewhat regularized, right? And we're at like $1 trillion and we're at 1% of all miles driven are autonomous.
But growing very quickly.
It's starting to grow. Yeah. I think like you solve the hand problem. There's definitely kind of, these environmental challenges. I do wonder, like, maybe you've got an answer to this, but like, is part of the reason why autonomous vehicles have been slow is because Americans actually love to drive. They also love doing craft, like the passion of a craft worker. And I think a construction company is going to be highly resistant to bringing in robots. Notwithstanding the fact there's going to be a CapEx challenge, there's going to be like the uptime on a robot, like the safety needs to be 100%. You can't have a Hindenburg moment on a construction site with a humanoid craft robot and then just be like, oh, well, safety is your brand. Yeah. No, you can't. Like people just stop working.
It becomes HAL from
it becomes HAL, exactly. I think it's going to happen. I just think the timelines are further along. And also I would say is, let's assume you bring in a robot onto a construction site, not a drone, not a rover, not like an actual bipedal, intelligent humanoid robot. And let's say it could be more productive. And that's the bit I'm a bit skeptical of. Like, can it be more productive? Because a lot of construction's delays or the absence of growth in productivity is actually because of sequencing and handing off one trade package to another. You know what I mean? Like, it's not.
You can't. You don't want to do the drywall before you've done the plumbing.
Yeah, it's not just how fast can you screw in a piece of drywall. It's like, but once you've done it, where's the electrician?
Right.
Okay. I wonder if we do get productivity gains, if we don't actually get an unlock in demand for construction, and the supply bottleneck continues to kind of improve in quality. You just end up with needing more labor that's more highly skilled to work with them on top of the robots. And then you end up with even more labor, like a Jevons paradox of construction labor.
Yeah, I think people are underestimating how long and impactful a middle wave of telematics and semi-autonomous robots will be. People think it's going from all human, and then they're going to wake up one day and it's all fully autonomous robots, whether they're purpose-built to do a particular job on the floor, like a grading thing, or whether it's a humanoid robot doing more complex carpentry. They think it's just going to switch. If you look at a lot of the autonomous vehicles, they have human lower cost labor backups that are playing essentially a video game. They might be sitting in the Philippines. I think Waymo is leveraging labor in the Philippines in this sort of semi-auto. So if something really goes off the rails, there is somebody sitting in a control booth and they can stop it.
Yep.
Or they have a better shot at stopping it than this algorithm that's just gone off the rails.
Yep.
I'm already seeing that in construction. I went to White Plains one day. My friend Zak he has this company. It's a semi-autonomous crane. They rebuilt a crane cab in this auto dealership in Yonkers, or auto body shop. And I was controlling a crane in Tel Aviv. And so I think you're going to see more of that with carpentry, more like the way robotic surgery is done, where it's like a OR doc is still in the room. I think that's where we're going more than robots. But when we even have full autonomy, we're still going to need a platform that selects, and all these companies are going to have reviews. They're not all going to have the same exact hardware and software and in these bots. So anyway, on that dystopian note, let me ask you a couple random questions. You told me you're a huge fan of the television show Frasier.
Right.
Why is that?
I was homeless for a while. When I actually came out of boarding school, I really didn't have any family and I ended up homeless for about 8 months. And I used to watch on a Friday night at a friend's house. It was a little respite from the streets, basically. And we'd watch Frasier. This was every Friday night, come on, like whatever. And I think there's something about the family dynamic. I also love they don't patronize the audience. The writing is really top class. The insider jokes, or the knowledge that they, like their love of classical music, and they never dumb it down at all. And so I always thought it was kind of like quite intellectually forward, and at the same time, that family dynamic had me kind of hankering for a family again. And so that anchored me a bit, and then I just kept watching. I actually met him once. It's quite random. Kelsey Grammer in a wine store in Chelsea. We both reached for the same bottle.
It was kismet.
And I was like, oh wow. And I said, it's had a huge impact on me. I didn't tell him my name because I thought that'd be weird. It's just too weird. He'd be called for security. You know what I mean? Like, just a bit weird. But I think the show is, I still rewatch it. It
holds up.
Oh, it holds up. No.
There's a lot of shows from back then.
Nah, they don't. No, it holds up. There's something heartwarming about it. And yeah, like I say, it was a nostalgia that caught on.
So if you could have, as a lead venture capital investor for your Series A round, Frasier or Niles Crane, who would it be and why?
Niles.
Why?
Higher IQ. The episode where he's like, They think that their mother told them that their IQs were 4 points apart. And then it turned out it was Niles who had the higher IQ. And so Fraser's like, well, 4 points. And then he's like, it's actually more like 28 or something. So he's like, he's got a 165 IQ or something. I think I'd pick Niles. I think he's got more firepower upstairs.
I think I would want Lilith.
Yeah?
As like a meta.
Well, you didn't give me that option, but yeah, I like
true.
Lilith. I like Lilith a lot. Bebe Newirth, is that? That's the actress?
That is correct.
Yeah, she's great. I like the one where they go, she comes back to, I guess they're in Seattle. She's from Boston, right? She comes because she wants them to have another kid. And he says, but how would this work? I mean, we'd have sex, that's a bit strange. And she's like, no. I was thinking we'd freeze your sperm. And he's like, is that a yes or a no? Like, is that, their interplay is brilliant, but no, I'd still pick Niles.
Well, this has been Between Zak and Aaron with Zak Aarons. Big thank you to our guest, Fraser Patterson, not Fraser Crane.
No.
But Fraser Patterson. The company is Skillit. Go check it out, and we'll see you next time.